Be sure to watch my TED Talk on londonreal.tv. In London, technology is the Silicon Roundabout. Introducing a new talk show dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. Silicon Real. Each week, interviewing entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, financial technology, accelerators, and incubators in an exciting three-person format. Learn about the people behind the innovation. Locally filmed, locally sourced. Silicon Real. It's about the people. Here we go. This is Silicon Real, the weekly talk show dedicated to the people of the London technology startup scene. I am Brian Rose. I host London Real. It's a similar studio. We get some cool people in the room. We try to figure some things out. We've had guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson, the celebrity astrophysicist. We had Tim Ferriss from the 4-Hour Work Week body chef. I know everything, right? I even had George Galloway in here, the member of parliament, and he charmed my pants off. It was the strangest performance I've ever seen, and I fell for it. So check that out at londonreal.tv. But today we're here to talk tech. My co-host is Colin Pyle. You've been gone for 6 weeks. Did you miss us? That's what I want to know. Did you miss us?
I missed it immensely.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not just saying that?
I missed the conversations.
Right.
I feel like I was left out, and I was listening to you guys. You know, you had Patrick on here as co-host, and you know, Dawson, and then Debu.
Yeah.
He just showed me up. So
I know.
It's like I'm the weak link here. You know, we got to get Debu back in.
I know. We had Debu on, who was he's the entrepreneur in residence for Octopus Investments. He was at Google for 6 years doing corporate development. He was the guest, and then the next week he showed up in the co-host chair. Yeah. And I was thinking, this is like House of Cards. Like the next week he's going to be in my chair.
Exactly.
I was like, geez. And Debu, you wouldn't, you never know. I mean, that guy's probably. And so, but he's not here, so I feel pretty good.
There we go.
But yeah, it was crazy while you were gone. But thanks for being back. It is fun. This show is fun.
It's great.
To quote the CEO of EasyJet, it's the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
Did he say that?
That's what he said about building EasyJet, the Irish guy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all good. Before I get on with the show, I just wanted to thank our sponsor, which are the folks at LendInvest. They're a P2P lending platform focused on the property lending industry in the UK. They just broke £100 million in money invested. We just had their founder on, Christian Fays, about a month ago. Yeah. It's a really cool business. It's a fascinating niche they have. You can kind of get some pretty good returns on kind of bridge loan financing for kind of UK property in London. So a big thanks to those guys. You can find out more on lendinvest.com. They're members of the Innovate Finance, which is a new trade body to promote the growing fintech sector. You guys are on that. And so is DoDil, which was on here a couple months ago, TransferWise from a year ago. So maybe you can tell us more about Innovate Finance. So thanks to those guys. Let's get on with the show. I'll introduce this gentleman here to my left. It's Mr. Nick Hungerford, who is the CEO of Nutmeg, the company on a mission to democratize saving and investing.
Absolutely.
You guys provide online portfolio management service to anyone with as little as £1,000 to invest. You just raised a $32 million funding round with people like my former CEO, Michael Spencer of iCap. I had no idea. And some other investors. It's just so exciting to see these big rounds coming out.
Huge.
Right? DoDil and TransferWise. It's like, this is happening, right?
And it's happening here, right?
Yeah, I know.
In London.
That's what I mean.
Fantastic.
But even a year ago, we weren't talking about this.
Yeah, so. TransferWise was like 25, DoDil was like 22, and BrandWatch too was like 20.
Yeah,
so
that's true. So it's really a chunky investment. So that's great to see. Nick, before that, you were at Barclays Wealth Management. Before you headed west and went to California for your MBA at Stanford. I want to get your vibe on the Silicon Valley scene. But for now, welcome to Silicon Real.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Thanks for being here. This will be a lot of fun. I first heard about you guys when I was on the Tube, which shows that Tube ads work. And I do take the Tube because I'm a man of the people.
There we go.
And I saw your ads up there, and you got these guys with kind of skinny legs and skinny arms, and I was like, what is this? And I was like, what is this? I've never heard of this. And you have a name like Nutmeg, which obviously isn't immediately identifiable to a brand, or it's not, it doesn't have the word banking or finance in it. And then the more I learned about it, I was just like, you know what? I don't even have an option when it comes to my own wealth management. And I come from the banking industry. And like, as soon as my local bank wants to sell me an equity linked note, I'm just like, no, because I know how much money we used to take out of those things. And so like, I don't trust anybody with my money because I can't see it. And it doesn't seem transparent. I can't check up on it. And so I was more interested about you guys. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the genesis of Nutmeg, and if what I'm telling you is what you hear all the time.
Sure. Well, I am going to tell you about Nutmeg, and I would never miss a good opportunity to plug the brand.
Yes, but...
or what we do. But let me start with some fun stories, because you highlighted a bit on the name there. We actually tested over 8 months, 519 names to get to Nutmeg.
Really?
We have a horrendous Google Doc, and I promise you some of them were just so disgusting, and I am so glad that we didn't go with them.
You used to be Hungry Finance, right?
Well, I mean, Hungry Finance was a placeholder name.
Okay, when you were creating the concept.
It's a fantastic play on words. This is how creative I get.
Is that because it's your surname?
Hungerford, Hungry Finance.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Okay. But also quite a good one. Actually, the thing about Hungry Finance was it was very Marmite. You either loved it or you hated it. Right. And it was especially for females that we tested the name with. A group of them said, absolutely, I love this. It's purposeful, it's meaningful. But a group said it's very greedy, it doesn't mean anything, sounds to me like an existing incumbent. Most of the male population we tested with were a bit more neutral, and we're just like, oh, I don't get that. So we knew we had to change, and it took us 8 months, and went through this whole process of trying to decide whether we wanted one of the 4 types of names. So did we want a type of name that was aspirational? And so many times in finance you have these aspirational names, named after planets. Right. Pluto and Neptune and all this.
Or like Fidelity or something.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. The second type of name that you can have is a name of whoever it is that started the company. Right. So we could have Colin and Nick. Right?
Marks and Spencer.
Hey, there you go. Okay. Or Sainsbury's, right? Or Walmart or whatever it is. But actually, Colin and Nick coffee isn't bad, is it? I think we could.
I just got right out of the
loop.
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus.
Well, I mean, you can invest.
Silent investor.
Founders equity gone.
You have 3. The third type of name is just a made up name. So the best example of this that everybody knows is Yahoo with an exclamation mark.
Okay, that was one of the first. Just
one of the first, one of the most famous. Just doesn't mean anything.
Completely out of the blue, yeah.
And then you have the 4th type of name, which is something that represents an existing word and has an association, but is not relevant to the subject that you're dealing with. So 2 most famous examples in tech community would probably be Amazon and Apple.
I was thinking Orange in the UK, but I guess that's a mobile service. So Amazon and Apple, right? Completely.
Yeah.
Right, Amazon's a great one.
Right.
Well, so is Apple.
Yeah. And Amazon really is our sort of, the strategic company we look at and look up to. But Nutmeg fits into those categories. And the reason we went with Nutmeg was it was the only name that tested in our focus groups at above 50% for trust out of everything. And so we knew it was familiar. People remember it. People would be inquisitive when they saw it on our advertising. People trusted the name. We paid a fair amount for the domain, but we got it now.
That's fascinating. And do the test groups, the focus groups, how do you do that? Do you outsource that to someone and they interview, or?
Yeah, wow. I mean that's such an important subject for Nutmeg. So we are massive fans of design, and really this comes back to our Californian sort of upbringing for Nutmeg. We learned over there, and both our designers, our head designers, went to Stanford as well. They were part of the design school. One was a Berkeley PhD, and he taught at Stanford, and then the other one was, I always tell him he's the boy wonder at the design school. And they have such an emphasis on the right ways to do design, and how we do it is through deep ethnographic research. So we will spend 4 or 5 hours at a time observing people and observing their behaviors, and not asking them what they want, right? Because you have that old Henry Ford adage: if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? So you've actually got to observe people and figure out what they need. And then it's your job, this is what Steve Jobs said, it's your job to design something that is beautiful and fulfills that need. And so then when they go, oh, wow, like this does it in a way I never imagined, then you're on the path to success. So we did do focus groups, and we bring them in-house, and we have lots of people talking. But more important with those focus groups is to watch how they react to each other, especially when they talk about subjects like money, and see what emotions that brings out, and then take away the unseen things and meet the unmet needs, which is the fascinating part of it.
So this isn't just the user experience. This is the whole concept of your company.
Right.
I mean, it took a long time to do that. Right?
Yeah, we took over a year to do this because
it really shows though. Like so I just registered this week for you guys, and it's like the user experience, the design, the whole way through it was smooth. So smooth. And there's a few companies that just smash it out of the park, right? And so I thought you guys were great. I think Y-Plan, their app, is incredible in terms of just simplicity, user experience.
Uber's pretty good, right?
Uber's, yeah. And it's just like, it takes time. Yeah.
Well, it should feel like it should be really quick whilst feeling really conscientious and really solid. I've learned so much about this, and it's the same for physical stores as well, right? So when you're designing
Apple's a good example,
right? The physical store that you go in, that's got to be everything about your brand.
Right.
Well, the studio is a good example, right? It feels comfortable, it feels professional. It's not, like underground and hidden away. And so when you're looking at this design, you just need to be so careful. And a year, I think, is, it's a long time in tech terms before you start building something. But actually, in reality, what we're trying to do is transform a 400, 500, 600-year-old industry that has forever been, bank out. We're going to be open 9 till 5. We're going to give you a product that is called insurance, right? And you're going to eat it, whether you like the taste of it or not. And we're trying to be consumer in. And if I give one example of how we do this, it's about thinking about the goals that we allow people to set up. So when people have money and they usually get to £500,000 or more, and they finally get to the stage where someone's willing to have a conversation with them about managing their money, they'll go to a private bank and they'll say, hey, I've got this money. And the private banker will say, that's cool, give it all to me. Let's decide if you're low, medium or high risk, and I'll come back in 6 months and we'll check on how you're doing. Nobody, unless they're some sort of behavioral scientist, is going to be able to properly articulate in one word if they are low, medium or high risk. What does that even mean? Well, I'm low risk when I'm playing football because I don't want to break my leg. I'm high risk when I'm skiing because I go off piste. Financially, I don't know. Like maybe I'm high risk for something in the long term. I'm low risk for my house deposit. And the designers in our team thought about this and they said, well, why don't we allow people to make different buckets, different pots of investment? So you guys can set it up and you can have 4 buckets. One for your daughter, one for your second home in Italy, one for your fancy car, one for your retirement. And with each of those buckets, you can then say, I'm low risk, I'm medium risk, I'm high risk. And that is design, right? That is about saying, I understand how humans feel, and I'm going to let them articulate that feeling through our product.
And what did you learn in that 1 year, besides what you're saying right now? What did you learn about what the customer wanted that maybe surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting things. So you guys obviously, both come from across the pond, and you'll know success of some of the money aggregators. So Mint.com is a very famous money aggregator.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit of a tech nerd, and I loved Mint.com when I was over there. Great user experience, great design. It allowed you to aggregate your money. It allowed you to see things very clearly in one place. So I'm thinking, this is a great idea. Let's come back. Let's build this up. Be a good way of attracting customers, like the freemium model type for Nutmeg. And then when we started doing this design, it became apparent that British people, and I think this is probably Europeans as well, but I'm not qualified to give that judgment. British people like squirreling away their money and their accounts in different pockets. So they very, very rarely tell anyone where everything is. And they're certainly not going to tell a website because they don't want one website knowing where everything is.
Interesting.
So an aggregator over here there've been many attempts, and they're just coming around now. But that really shocked me. So the dynamic there was, we love seeing everything all at once, and the dynamic here was, we love being in control of everything in different parts of our lives.
So you thought about being the Mint for the UK, and then you quickly realized you needed to be something different.
Yeah, I think our dream was always to be, the investment manager that we are today. But you can bring supplementary products on all the time, and that could have been something that we could have done to help our clients. As it turns out, they wouldn't have wanted it. So you learn and you evolve in a different way.
So fast forward us to today, from like the last 3 years. What did you guys end up accomplishing, and why do you think you guys can kind of win in this space? I'm guessing there's competition. So
heavy competition,
for money,
rich competition. Prepared to pay a lot of money for customers. I think, we were lucky in the timing, right? So Occupy Wall Street, rising markets, they have helped Nutmeg, and there's no shame in saying that. But I think what's really attracted our customers is simply the transparency and the ease of use. And it's very funny, when interview customers and say, what do you like about Nutmeg? The answers are sometimes quite different to what attracted you to Nutmeg. So a lot of people come in because of our good performance, fingers crossed, touch wood, that'll continue, our low fees. And a lot of people stay because it's transparent, right? Because we're doing the hard work for them, because they can see how much effort we're putting into managing their money. Because we send them a video every month saying, we've just bought a bit of German equities because we think they're undervalued, and we've sold some Italian exposure because we think the political risk is increasing. And you just don't get that level of service or communication anywhere else.
You send that video out to everyone.
Right, and it's varying for different portfolios, so you get information about yours, and that was a learning for me as well, knowing that people come and people stay for different reasons.
That's interesting.
But in terms of accomplishment, I'm proud that we have won, I think, more awards for innovation this year than everyone else in the industry put together in this country.
Wow. What kind of awards for the design, the UX?
A lot of awards for design and UX, but also just for the way that we think about it and we approach it. I mean, we're now in the top 25 wealth managers in this country by number of clients.
How many? What's that number?
We're over 40,000 users at the moment.
Wow. And a big year-on-year growth, like 300%.
Actually, that's not true. It's about 38,000. Sorry, about 38,000.
And big growth.
Yeah, it's growing fast, but some of the people on that list have taken 250 years to get to that level of number of clients, right? And that's that's the way that the technology businesses can develop rather than the one-on-one sale. I think word of mouth is really important to that.
And what do you do? How do you deal with competition going out? I mean, obviously, if you're going against the non-innovating banks, I'm guessing you don't have to worry about them as much. But are there other people coming at you? How do you stay as number one?
I mean, there's three types of competition for us. One is the high-end wealth managers, and obviously they provide a one-on-one service, whether that's a bank or a private bank or a stockbroker. And we don't play in that market for necessarily attracting customers of £3 million, but our customers who are very wealthy, who are generally able to access that kind of option, that they get it. I mean, if they come to Nutmeg, they get it. So someone with £3 million is typically paying £40,000 a year to have their money managed. I think that's totally crazy.
That's a lot of money.
Right? At Nutmeg, you're paying about £1,000 probably.
Was that 1% they pay to
the industry average is 1.37. Okay. That's just to have it managed. Underlying costs, of course, will be all the rest of it. So it's pretty easy for those people, if they want, to calculate the fact that they're saving £20,000 a year with us.
Because you're less than 1%.
Well, for those high-end customers, we're including all tax and stuff, 0.3%.
Wow.
So it doesn't take much, but then you've still got to break up the service relationship, right? So we don't actively go and do that. Those clients come to us because they've determined that it's better. Second competition is DIY platforms. So people, and this, if you don't have £500,000, this is your only option, right, for investing. So you go to Fidelity, Schwab in the States, someone like that, and you're saying, I want to buy this stock, I want to buy this fund. Well, lots of people do that. And then we generally pick up those customers 2-3 years after they've started investing and realizing, actually, you need to be looking at this 24 hours a day, right? You need a team doing it for you.
You need some help, right? Yeah.
Well,
You do, though.
You do. I mean,
unless you want to do it full time or you're a city guy.
Right. I remember when I was running my FX company, people used to day trade through us, and they would do it like part time. And I'm like, when you're doing, financial services part time trading, you're saying that you're better than a guy who wakes up at like 5 in the morning and goes home at 8 at night and still is, researching. You're better than him.
Yeah, and all his colleagues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and all their researchers and everything. Right. It's just like, you're just not, and it's so hard to trade part-time.
Yeah. So that's our theory, right? So people, on one end, are smart enough about cost and performance, on the other end, are smart enough about the service. And then the third competitor, frankly, is apathy, right? And it's just people leaving money in the bank, maybe they're saving up, in this country to buy a house or do something like that.
Guilty on apathy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I know.
And we've got to get you doing something about it.
I still don't, yeah.
We've got to get you doing something about it. And it's funny, people often say, I'm really good at managing, organizations, businesses, finances, except my own.
It happens a lot. It's shocking even that it happens that much.
See, for me, I use InvestDirect, right, for HSBC, and I just manage my own. But even then, it's, I'm really just stock picking and just not diversified at all.
Yeah. And it must feel like you're kind of like, I'm guessing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. What's the average net worth of your client? I'm sure it has a big standard div, but
Yeah, I think it's probably easier to talk in medians because as you know, we have billionaires on there, so there's a significant impact on the average.
Right.
Probably going to say net worth around 330, 340, 100, so £340,000
Okay.
maybe, or something like that.
Gotcha.
What I'm trying to do in my head and think about this is because lots of our clients will be in the process of paying down a mortgage, so you net the debt off and so on and so forth. And our clients are interesting. Some people come and give us all of their liquid cash straight away, but others tend to test us with a small amount and then build up their accounts over time.
Interesting.
And just see how we're doing and check the service and that kind of thing.
Talk to me about UX, because you mentioned it earlier, and it's. I mean, this is how this makes or breaks companies. Who are we kidding, right?
Yeah.
And people get it right or they get it wrong. You've obviously taken some time. You got some hotshot Stanford grads to do it. I'm guessing you watch it all the time and try to improve it. How do you get it right? In an industry that's where everyone's trying to get it right.
I think you allow these guys who are incredible, to fly really. And one of the key tenets that we took out of building this was that we weren't going to hire people for UX who had worked in finance before.
Oh, right.
So if you come from a background that is finance, you're going to build things like you've done it before.
Right, where the customer's not important, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are requirements. And actually, it's worth mentioning, of course, that we have compliance and regulatory constraints. So you've got to plaster risk warnings everywhere. You've got to really make sure that you highlight the perils of investing to people, and that it's going to be bumpy. And one way that I would illustrate this in a really telling way, and this is a good lesson for all financial services companies, I think, is we discovered over the last 3 years that if you make it easy for people to take out their money, they trust you more. Right? If you start operating on teaser rates and lock-in periods and fees for taking out money, people are like, oh, hang on, I'm going to need that. And so if we are more open with them, and this is real UX stuff, if we are more open with them, they tend to be more open with us.
Funny when they say cancel anytime you want,
Yeah.
you're just so much more trusting, especially these contracts and all
people
that.
So with my coffee, the subscription, it's amazing. The first couple months we were running, people are like, hold on, what do you mean I can cancel anytime I want? Where's the catch?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the catch?
No catch, man. If you don't like my coffee, that's cool.
But isn't it sad that mankind's got to the point where it's like we're asking where the catch is?
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
surely it should be the other way around.
Yeah.
Very philosophical. What's your biggest challenge in the next year? Is it scaling? That's such a big issue in this industry. Well, you're at the scale level, so this is really the big time. It's like everything you've done up to now was so hard. Now that doesn't matter, and now you have to scale or die. Is it like that, and how do you do it?
Well, we've all lived through that. As entrepreneurs, going from one person to 6 people is different to going from 6 people to 15, going from 15 to 30, 30 to 80, 80 to 200 or whatever it is.
And you're about 40 now?
Yeah, so we're in that stage of sort of 30 to 80 and almost 50. And I think it's totally different. So I would echo what you've said. It's totally different to run, going from 5 to 15. And so there are those growing pains that you have to start thinking much more about procedures and policies and making people happy, not just because, there's a couple of bananas on the table, right? It's actually like we are going to have a proper organizational structure and
corporate culture and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's, so when you talk about challenges, it's easy for me to reel off things like sort of team and product development and all the rest of it. But, actually, if we really want to be the company we want to be, then one of the hardest things we've got to do now is maintain the corporate culture that we have. And our corporate culture is to think about the customer in every decision that we make. So whether it's what office do we want and how much is that going to cost us, to a product development, and actually that's pretty hard to do, right? Pretty hard to do. Amazon, I read, had a great example the other day. So they started by building their own desks, which we didn't know about, but we did that as well.
Yeah.
And
with
when
doors, right?
you had the doors,
Yeah,
right?
with
So
doors,
when Bezos went down to the shop, the cheapest wood he can find was the doors. So,
Yeah.
they still have them apparently.
Yeah, apparently they still have them, and your desk is a door. And if you ask why your desk is a door,
Yeah.
they tell you because the customer, we save it for the customers. The whole ethos. If you look at those old 60-minute interviews, there's Jeff Bezos and his door desk.
Yeah.
You know, and he's driving a crappy car, and yeah, I mean, I guess everything carries down. So I'm reading Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. He's one half of Andreessen Horowitz, you know, big VC fund in Silicon Valley, and he's all about talking about how you make this transition now and how you really try to instill that company culture. And if you don't do these things and get these managers right and get these, the EKRs and everything, then it just is not going to happen. And it's fascinating. He also is a big fan of having the founder and the CEO stay with the company and not to hire someone to scale. And I want to get your thoughts on that.
That's happening less and less. Someone told me a stat recently that like how small a percentage of startups after 3 years actually have the sort of founder CEO.
Oh, keep it. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the ones that survive, right?
Right.
So probably a good 50% of those are dead.
Easy, yeah.
So it's tricky. I mean, I remember in that book you're talking about, the Horowitz book. He goes through a specific incident about swearing.
Yeah.
And whether they should allow swearing in
he swears a lot, and he got some complaints about it, and so they had a big meeting about it, right?
Yeah.
So tell the story.
Well, I mean, as far as I remember it, they determined that it was a part of the culture, and they wanted to keep it, and they were going to, they just wanted people to feel comfortable around the fact that there was going to be swearing, and I think these are the kind of decisions that you need to make, and just reinforce to the team, but. What you need to do that's so important that people forget is you need to communicate them to new starters, right? Because that's what's so hard about it. So it's all very well for us to say, okay, the three of us are going to set up a business. We've got a corporate culture here. We're going to have to decide between, shirts and T-shirts for the three of us, right? So that's going to be tricky. But it's fine. We've made our decision. But what about number 4 who comes in the door? What about number 5? What about number 6? And I think, the bit that's often hardest about maintaining corporate culture is the reality that there's an in crowd. And then there's new people, and you have to make sure that those new people feel comfortable.
Okay, so how do you do this? You're in a London tech startup market, in fintech no less, where everybody wants the talent. You've got to hire people in, you got to get the right people, and instill corporate culture. How do you do it?
Yeah, these are the kind of questions that professors charge like £3,000 an hour to answer, right? So,
it's consultants?
So here we go. I mean, for me, it's about taking the time up front to explain the culture, and then... I'm not the greatest person when it comes to sort of making sure it's all written down and giving a handbook and being like, here, where you start. I think that should be done, absolutely. But, where I think personally I can add value and you need both sides of the equation is the pre-discussion, right? So in our company, the culture is very thoughtful, it's very intellectual, it's very discursive. It's about wanting to get to know the person next to you because they're very, very interesting. But they're not necessarily going to volunteer that information, right? So everybody looks out for each other. It's polite, it's clean, it's not, edgy, right?
Okay. No swearing?
No, not particularly. Okay. Not particularly.
Okay. But that you're saying this is kind of different than some startups. You're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we go around, but it's different from big companies as well. And we all know that, as soon as you walk in from one place or to another, it's just a different way of doing things. But the atmosphere we wanted to create was where, no matter who it is, the most senior hire can go and have a drink or lunch, with the new intern who's come in, because we know that those people are going to be fascinating. We know that all of us are curious people. We know that, we're thinking about a mission which is really important, and it's not about being crazy for us. It's about driving something forward that is really meaningful. And as corny as it may sound, it's changing people's lives. And the reality is we have changed people's lives over the last 3 years.
Do you do team building exercises?
Yeah, occasionally. I don't want to reveal to the team what the next one is, but it's happening in 2 weeks.
Do they stand on the table and fall backwards? Or,
although
or
we are,
the market advanced?
I tell you, we have some keen beans in our office have just signed everyone up for the London Fitness Challenge, whatever it is, in Wembley. This 10K where you have to run over obstacles.
Yeah.
You guys should look at that.
Yeah, that would be good.
So I may not run over them, but I can probably roll over them.
So you'll do that and see if people want to do that.
Well, I think the whole team will be doing.
Is that mandatory?
It's not. I don't think it's going to be mandatory because someone needs to hold the drinks at the end. So we've got, there needs to be like, we're British. There needs to be some
like
beers.
A true Englishman.
Exactly.
There needs to be some beers at the end, right? But the problem for me is that, of course, being fiercely competitive, I'm now going to have to train because I can't let any of them beat me.
No, although one of them probably will, but
yeah,
maybe not.
Yeah. Fired.
I mean, yeah, they won't next year if they do this year.
Talk to me about Stanford. I mean, you spent 2 years, in California, and then you made a decision to come back to the UK, when I guess you could have done something similar in the States. A lot of people that we've had in this chair never had that experience. They've been here their whole lives. What did you learn at Stanford? What did you learn from the Yanks, and why did you decide to come home?
Yeah, well, I guess as we can all say safely in this environment now, we've all fled America, haven't we? So,
I know. Yeah.
They don't want me, so
Yeah, they don't want you. They probably don't want me anymore.
That's right. Look, it was a life-changing, wonderful experience that I would encourage anyone to go and do. I am a totally different person for being there. Incredibly more self-aware. Have the most wonderful friends. Have experiences to remember and laughs that I will never forget, and that's even without getting into the academia or anything like that. Stanford as a university is a place where it's just magical, and there's very little way of describing it other than superlatives. And those 2 years were very formative in everything that I've done for Nutmeg.
Was that a dream you always had, to go to school, an MBA in the States, or was it always West Coast?
Well, it wasn't MBA necessarily. So when I graduated high school, I wanted to be a teacher. So I still want to be a teacher. So when I grow up, I'm going to be a teacher. And I'm just, doing a bit of lecturing now and things, but...
like professor, college professor, university.
Yeah, just sort of getting into that. But I really wanted to be a teacher. So I went over to Canada and got a teaching job, and I lived in Vancouver. Really, really loved it.
Nice.
And on my summer holidays, I went down to California. I had a couple of cousins living down there. And so I stopped by, and tech stuff was exploding in California. It was just an incredible period. Everyone was having an amazing time, really good fun. And so I thought, okay, this is cool. I'd like to be involved in this, because I'd always loved business as well. So that was a real passion for mine, and making money, I guess, which is why university wasn't necessarily on the cards, going straight to a job. So they said to me, hey, why don't you go to Stanford? You'll love it. So I turned up Stanford, knocked on the door, go down Palm Drive, said, hey, can I come study here? And they looked at me and they were like, are you serious? Yeah, they were like, no, you can't. You're from high school in England, average grades, haven't done the application forms. Go back and think about it again.
You literally went to the campus.
I went to the campus. Because I didn't know. Neither of my parents went to university. Like, it wasn't something that was ingrained in our family. And I guess from that moment I was like, I really want to come. I really want to come, and I really want to be part of this. I just love the scene. I came back to the UK. Did start my university. I went to Exeter. Had a wonderful time there with many lifelong friends. Now some of my best friends. Did lots of business ventures there. Played a lot of sport, did a bit of work. But for me, that environment, that Stanford environment, was always going to be where I wanted to learn, where I wanted to do my study. A lot of inspiration from other pupils. I mean, we used to get together after class at Stanford and form groups and discuss businesses and rip each other apart. And but it's so it's the place you want to be, because everyone's like it's so sharp.
Highly entrepreneurial. Mm.
Well, yeah, but it's more than just entrepreneurial, because entrepreneurs are, I used this analogy yesterday, but entrepreneurs are the kind of people who are good in defense and good in attack, right? So you're really stubborn and persistent, you solve the problems, and you're really good on attack, and you're visionary. Not so good in stable motion. And the thing about Stanford is there are a lot of entrepreneurial people there, but you're also dealing with people who can challenge you because they're sector specialists or professors who are world leaders in their field. I remember during the financial crisis, I was talking to one of my finance profs in his office, and we're having a good discussion about another crazy idea that I'd had, and the phone started going, and so he looked down after 2 rings and looked up, looked down again, looked up and said, Nick, do you mind if I take this? It's the White House.
Let's say it's Greenspan.
And I was like, yeah, okay, no problem.
Sure. 5 minutes only.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense. All right, so you had a good experience at Stanford.
Yeah.
Did you think about staying in the Valley?
I thought about it, and the honest truth is that it was better for us to set up Nutmeg here from a regulatory point of view, from a marketplace point of view, from a technological adoption point of view. So more Brits, for example, use mobile banking than and online banking than everywhere in the world, apart from Iceland. Be amazed to hear a high percentage. The regulator here is incredibly, responsive to smaller companies. They've just set up a new project, Innovate, where they're going to incubate small companies. The regulator is going to incubate small companies. I mean, this is
that was good to hear.
Awesome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just great. Everything was really conditioned to be here. There's great engineering talent. You're not fighting with Facebook and Google for those guys. So yeah, I mean, it felt like a sensible fit. And of course, although I'm not from London, I do think it's the greatest city in the world, and I couldn't face being in San Francisco where everything shuts at 2:00 and.
Amen to that. And you spent time there on the West Coast. When you come back and look around and look about the mentality and the way that London's developing, is there stuff that you see from that Stanford lens where you're like, okay, we need a little more of this, we need a little more crunchiness or hippiness or UX or something? There must be some California part of you that brings you in a different direction as opposed to, if you went to LBE or something like that.
Sure. I mean, maybe for me, it's not necessarily the cultural stuff, because I don't think I'd ever be, a massive hippie type character. But I think it's the ecosystem, right? It's the belief. So I'll give you an example. When I came back and I was at a drinks party with my folks, it was Christmas, and speaking to someone who asked me what I was doing, it was, one of my parents' friends, and I said, "Hey, I'm starting a company." And I just never forget. She said, "Don't worry, Nick, you'll find a job soon." Right?
This is 2010,
yeah,
11,
something like that. And I just thought to myself, that just wouldn't be the case in California, right? Because the whole ecosystem, the whole cool thing to do is be an entrepreneur, and more significant than any company that's grown in this country over the last 3 years that I've been back, or more significant than any funding round that's happened, has been the entire feeling of development of startups and technology and entrepreneurship in this country. And I promise you, if I had that same conversation now, that person, even being outside London, even being older, would say that's cool.
Right.
That's a great thing to do. And it's what makes it real is the fact that usually as you're part of this stuff, you don't feel it. But I think we could all agree that we actually do feel it. The rise of tech, the rise of young business, the influx of people from all around the world who want to work in London. And it's just phenomenal. And I think that has been the single most important thing that's happened, for our ecosystem. And if I could choose what to take from California, I'd take another 10 years of development, another 10 years forward. But, if they took from Bill Draper in 1950 to where we are today to get to Silicon Valley, I reckon we're going to do that in a fifth of the time here in London. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. What do you see from a business standpoint when you look at their business, and do you see like problems or issues? I mean, you were in finance for a long time.
Yeah, I guess the biggest problem I see with what you guys do, it's so hard to scale outside of a country. Do you know what I mean? Because it's so regulatory heavy. And so for, a guy like me, I'm from Canada and, I'm here, maybe I work in the US or something. It's just having your platform international would just destroy the banks. And I'm waiting for that to happen. But, we were talking earlier about the US regulators and dealing with US guys. Do you see that ever changing, or is that like really, really far down the road?
Well, I mean, let's get to that stage first. And this is one of the attractive areas about fintech is as a entrepreneur and as an investor, right? I mean, we need a tiny proportion of the market to be a massive company, right? Because there are so many people out there, and all of them require saving and investment. So if we had 1% of the UK saving market, we'd be in the FTSE 100.
Wow.
If we had 5%, we'd be bigger than Facebook,
The biggest company in the UK.
I mean,
So you don't really need to go outside.
We don't really need to go outside, right? But
that's the quote of the episode. If we had 5% of the market, we'd be bigger than Facebook.
But I mean, yeah. And by the way, that's completely unqualified, not calculated, whatever. But
he's going to get a call soon.
Yeah.
He'll be like, "Can I take this?" It's Zuckerberg.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll be over there if they want to do a partnership, but it's going to have to be 60-40, ask them. I mean, you know, it is the beauty, but it's also the tough bit, right? So because it's such a valuable market, because it's so big, there's so much competition, right? So when you talk about challenges, you know, I think expanding into other countries is a bit of a luxury problem. Interestingly, the biggest thing I think about that is not about regulation, it's about culture. Because I am damn sure that, you know, every European nation has a very different culture, very different approach to savings. You know, the average Italian moves out of home at 42. Right? That's very different to how we approach it here. So we'd have to go through that year period in every country before we as a company and our culture and our sort of mentality would feel comfortable about even thinking about that. Yeah. But let's spend the next 3-4 years dominating the UK, get really big, and then we'll have the resources to start doing that. And yeah, happy to have a conversation if you want to start Canada branch for us.
So you could acquire that in the future. You might acquire the guy that's doing it in Spain or doing it in Italy, or who knows, maybe you'll cross that bridge in the future. But you know, Damien said the same thing about due diligence. He's like, why do we have to go to America?
Yeah, it's true.
He was quite insistent on that, right?
Yeah, and it's true, you know, it becomes that focus, right? We've heard over and over again, just focus on, you know, just do one thing really well in one market, and that's usually pretty good.
Yeah, that's come up a couple times. Even Emily from Blaze, you know, they do the laser light that projects the laser light way out in front. And she started off by saying, yeah, we're going to diversify products. And then she was like, actually, we decided, I think we're going to focus on this one thing and get this one thing right. So you've been quoted as saying, never get asked the same question twice. You've said that. What does that mean?
Yeah. So this is, actually I say it quite a lot because if you're talking about fundraising and how you should fundraise, this is the context in which I like to use this line. But when I started fundraising for Nutmeg, I think it was the 48th pitch where I got something. I was about a month away from stopping and going into a real job. And what I learned very quickly towards the end of those sort of number 35 was that I was presenting this pitch and it had been refined, and I practiced with friends and practiced with friendly VCs and done all the rest of it, but it was always the same pitch and I was always getting the same questions, and therefore I was always ending up with a 0 result. And what never get asked the same question twice means is if you are covering in your presentations the area which are important to the potential investors, right, then eventually someone somewhere is going to have no questions to ask you. And generally that means there's nowhere to go apart from them to offer you money. And that's kind of what I learned on those last 10 pitches, was I was going to be pre-prepared, right? I was going to include in my 2 minutes of talking, 5 minutes of talking, the answer to the question. And I soon worked out that if you nailed it down, then the poor guy who ends up being number 48 is like, oh God, I better give this guy some money.
So anticipate what they're going to want to know, or just make sure your presentation is so tight there's no holes in it.
Use what you've learned from your last presentation, right? Your last conversation, to make sure that question never comes up, right? So if we were having a conversation now and you were pitching to me an idea, and I said to you, right, what's the market size here? And you said, oh, well, it's 1 million people, but 50,000 of them are going to use the product. And then of those, we think 20% will be repeat visitors. That's not much. That's 10,000 people, right, who are going to come back. So when you're then pitching to Colin next time, you need to say, right, the addressable market here is 1 million people, but we reckon 10,000 are going to be loyal customers. They're going to be high-value customers to us. Here's how we engage them. After a period of engagement, we're then going to use them to be advocates for our product, and we'll spread it to another 10,000, etc. Right, so he can't ask you a question about market size because you've dealt with that. And that's the thing. He's going to ask you something different. He's going to ask you about your financials, whatever it is. And then for the next person, you go, oh, and our addressable market is 1 million, then you do that, and then you say our financials are this. And, it is a pretty surefire way of knowing that if you can solve all those questions, you can have a good result.
Right. So learn from your mistakes, and if there are no questions at the end, then they have to write you a check.
And then be quiet, right, at the end. So stop.
That's a good technique.
And then make them ask the question.
That's a good technique.
It's like the snowball effect of pitching, because
Right.
it's just you're constantly building on your pitch to incorporate what you've learned with all the previous pitches. I think it's great advice.
Another thing you spoke about is you said as a person you need to find out what motivates you, and you need to really drill down. This probably goes back to your research work for Nutmeg, and you said that like it could be wealth or it could be lifestyle or notoriety or changing the world, but you need to figure out what motivates you, like really get granular on it, and then go from there. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so when you're an entrepreneur, you're going to spend every waking moment of your life thinking about this thing. You're going to bore your friends silly by talking about your company. Your family are going to, think you're a complete nutter because you're living in an apartment that you also house 4 people in to do coding into the middle of the night. And somehow, somewhere, you've got to know there's a purpose at the end of it. And it's absolutely fine if that purpose is financial, right? It's absolutely fine if your purpose is to save the world. And we see many incredible people doing these amazing things all over the world, for non-profits and for think tanks. We see many people who are doing something because they have a real passion for whatever it is, and whether it's design or e-commerce or whatever. But knowing that, right, is it allows you to justify to yourself why you're being so mad, right? Because there are always times that you're thinking, why? Why am I doing this? And it's an interesting one. I mean, for me, it's about knowing that I can affect change for people, and particularly affect change for my friends. My sister's a good example of someone who works really hard, but isn't necessarily particularly interested in her investments. And I know that by her saving with Nutmeg, she will get to retire earlier than if she saved with someone else, because we're not ripping her off on fees. We're doing everything we can to build an optimal portfolio. And that really matters to me, right? So when I ask, why should I get out of bed in the morning? It's because I really, really want to change the industry, and I really, really want to change the lives of these consumers. And that makes me happier than anything else in the world.
And what else motivates you?
What else motivates me?
Besides changing the world?
I don't know.
That's not enough?
That's not enough. I mean, obviously for me, it's there are other things as well, but I'd say the secondary. So, I love the idea of keeping fit, for example. So I do a lot of exercise. I love being able to travel, and particularly in the last 4 years, it's been wedding dominated. So
Okay.
I've been to, I think this Saturday is my 36th wedding in the last.
Are you always the bridesmaid, never the bride?
That's true.
That's
true.
what happens when you go to grad school,
That's
right?
true. I've caught 15 bouquets and I still haven't found anyone. That's right.
If you're listening and you're interested. No, it's interesting because you mentioned those pieces. And do you think everybody falls into one of those things, kind of wealth, lifestyle, notoriety, or changing the world?
I'm sure there are more than the examples we're giving, right? But there is definitely like a control one, for example. People who want to be in control. That's another one. So that we could make a list of the buckets and publish a thesis, I guess. But it is all about understanding who you are and where it's coming from, right? And if you were to ask your 3 best friends and your family, do you think this is the true reflection of me? And they said yes, then I think you're probably onto
right.
Probably onto a winner.
Feedback loop. Are you getting any blowback from the industry? Do you hear from banks that they're like, I don't know about these guys, they might be affecting our market share? Or do you find it's the opposite, where banks are just oblivious to the fact until they lose a chunk of market share, and then they're going to do something? How are you finding it?
Good question. I mean, we do get a lot of visits, I guess, from larger organizations. So it's amazing. The people that have been down to
like Barclays Wealth Management will show up. Or?
Yeah, I mean, totally. People have been down to Nutmeg Towers in Vauxhall. They're amazing CEOs and board members of these.
Just to talk, because they're not going to be investing.
Just to talk, right? Just to talk and see what's going on in the world, and I think they have their strategic priorities as well. It's a differentiated market. We have people who are focusing on giving advice, people who are focusing on low value clients, people who are focusing on 500,000, 3 million, people who are focusing on 10 million plus. So I think everyone's interested in this. I think one common factor that runs from us all the way through this business is that we've got to do a better client experience. So I think lots of people are looking at Nutmeg in the industry to think, well, could we provide an online experience? Do we want our customers, right, to be logging in every day? Do we want them to have that visibility? We've taken the view that whether we want them to or not, from a customer service point of view, it's what they want. But you have different arguments. So
you'll probably make it the standard, just like next day delivery.
Yeah,
Right?
I don't think most banks want that transparency. I asked the HSBC how much
Probably
you charge
can't
me.
mark you to market every day anyways.
Exactly.
I don't know, electronically.
And then you find out, they're taking 3% on your FX and all this sort of stuff, and they'd rather it in the shadows.
Yep, and I think that's again, it's it's such a sad reflection of what is potentially a very noble industry.
Yeah.
We're helping people with doing these things. And free banking is a good one to argue here, right? Because I would much prefer that my banking was entirely transparent and I knew what was going on and I paid £10 a year for my current account. I would absolutely prefer that. Right? If I knew there was no ripping off, there was nothing else, but I paid £10, I'd be up for that. All right? Or what can happen is we don't know that it's happening. It's therefore branded as free, right? There's no charge, but then there are all the sneaky charges. And I just think that's the wrong way around. It may feel better for me because I don't feel I'm being charged.
But then once you find out, it's
right.
horrible.
Right. And now most people know in finance that that's happening.
Yeah.
And you want an escape. Right? You want to get out of it.
You used to work for Barclays, and obviously now you're at a startup. The innovator's dilemma. We've all known it, and it comes up in fintech all the time. And you see like these incubators now and accelerators that are sponsored by the banks. Is it ultimately going to be an innovator, a small guy like you, that brings this whole new experience? Is it possible for a big bank to do what you're doing, or do you think since their priorities are so out of whack and their fee structure is out of whack, they can never actually do it?
Yeah, we should say, by the way, both the books you mentioned. Horowitz and Christensen, probably top of the reading list as well.
Good, right? I'm listening to Horowitz.
Really, really good. So for anyone who's looking for summer reading, definitely pick up both of those. But you can do it in a big company. Procter & Gamble is a great example of this. They deliberately set up companies to compete with existing companies they have. That is brave, right?
Yeah.
That takes some thinking about. So how did the management develop that style to be able to say that we're committed to doing that? Frankly, one of the issues with large finance companies is they have so many legacy systems that even just fixing those is going to be 10 years.
Wow, 10 years.
And that's going to be an issue. So I think that the changes that we've seen in incubators and in-house VCs and all this are incredibly important. But when I think about who's going to be developing the new way to buy your house, I don't think it's going to be banks, right? I think it's going to be Google, right? Someone's going to come up with something different that isn't a mortgage, and that's not going to be a bank. And it's going to be a startup player. And the way I describe it when I'm talking to the board of a bank or something is you guys have to understand that it's like building loads and loads of Lego blocks on top of each other, right? Where one Lego block is FX, and one Lego block is bond trading, and one Lego block is insurance, and one Lego block is investments. Right, and you are all of these things, right? So you're the big pile of Lego, and it doesn't really feel like you're being touched too much because, someone is eating away at your FX trading, or someone is eating away at your, investment. So the person who's running those divisions is like, it's okay. I'm part of a big organization. I'm going to be there. But if you're running strategy and you're on the board of these things, you've got to understand that you're going from this to this to this to this to this, and eventually, what's going to happen is your Lego blocks are all still standing on top of each other, but they're all really small, right? Because other people have eaten your lunch in every one of those departments. And you've got to think, do we actually want to specialize, in some of these areas? And for example, Barclays has really chopped back its bar cap, its investment banking,
Big time.
In order to do that. And it's those kind of decisions which are very brave. It's going to be hard for a bank to replicate Procter & Gamble, but they can make efforts to be the best of what they be the best of what they do, I think in certain areas.
Good advice. Nick, we always ask everyone here a couple questions at the end. I'm going to hit you with them. If you can make a phone call to the 20-year-old Nick Hungerford and give that young man a bit of advice, what would you tell him to do?
Don't give up the double-handed backhand. I had a really good backhand.
Double-handed?
I used to, and now I'm single-handed.
What was it?
Pre-Agassi?
No. Who was doing? Was Agassi doing the double-handed?
Agassi was doing a double-handed.
Yeah. So you had that.
I had that,
and then you dropped it.
And I dropped it for one coach who.
For the serve and volley.
He wanted me to be more elegant and
more like Sampras when Sampras came around.
Yeah, it was very sad. So that would be one thing.
I haven't heard that one before.
There we go.
Okay, that's
were,
good.
were you like a rising star tennis player that the two hands was?
I most definitely was a maturing tennis player.
Okay. You seen the Royal Tenenbaums? Do you know that movie?
Yeah.
Were you that guy?
I've
Oh,
seen
okay.
that, sorry.
All right, we'll have to see that. The reference. Is that the only advice? You said there was a second thing.
Oh, I'm sure I could think of lots of
Okay.
things. But,
No, that's good. What is the best advice you've ever received in your life? Let's go for non-business, if you wouldn't mind. But business, if you want.
I'm sure from my mum and dad, and it would be like, just remember, the most important thing is to be happy. And I mean, that is something which, said properly and meaningfully is so important, right? If you are down in the dumps, if you're earning £300,000 a year and you're unhappy, you're not having a good life. This is not a dress rehearsal. So make sure every day you're doing something you love, surrounded by the people you love, and be happy. And if you're not happy, then change what you're doing.
Do you think our metrics are a bit out of whack, especially in a city like London, where everyone's like, I'm making this and I have this car and I should be happy, and they're not? I mean, do you think the metrics are whack sometimes, so people aren't really making evaluations about themselves, and then they crack after 4 or 5 years and have these life changes?
So it was Jennifer Alker's research recently that talks about the level of salary at which you progress happiness to,
right?
And then after that, you're no more happy.
What is it, 70 grand?
I think it's 75, yeah. And that was so interesting for me because obviously the big point there is that at some stage it's not about your progression, it's about the progression of people around you. So my friends have a bigger house, my friends' children go to this school, my friends getting promoted at that, etc. And that's what devalues your happiness. So are we looking at the wrong metrics? I'm not sure it's necessarily wrong, because that's humans and that's how we interact. But would it be better if we looked at gross domestic happiness like Bhutan instead of gross domestic product? We should do that as well. We should do that as well. I'm very proud of being part of a country in Britain and having lived in Canada and America where those countries are progressive and developing, and a good economy is something to be very proud of. But it's also absolutely for certain that we should have a good standard of living and a good culture and reducing crime and all the rest of it.
I saw my mom recently, and she said, without gratitude, there isn't happiness. And then she's like, actually, there is no happiness without gratitude. And I thought about it a lot the last couple of days, and I'm like, she might really have a point there.
Yeah, it's true.
And so it's like when you see these people that, have these sudden like near-death experiences and stuff, they come back and they're all of a sudden grateful for all the things that they never were grateful before.
Right. Yeah.
And then maybe they have a happiness spike. I don't know. I'm still working on that theory. The last question is advice to the 20-year-old that's listening somewhere around the world that wants to be involved in technology somehow, and they could be in China or they could be in California. What do you tell them?
What do I tell that person? I would tell that person that they should do whatever they can to join a company that has a mission that they can be passionate about, right? So whether it's interning at Amazon or sitting on the door of due deal until they finally give you a job, or being part of a fashion startup that has 3 people and volunteering to make the coffee. If I was 20 years old and I wanted to be in technology, I would do whatever it takes to go to the company that I was passionate about. Doesn't matter if it succeeds or fails. You're going to have an incredible learning experience. Do whatever they ask you to do. If they ask you to, learn design, learn design. If they ask you to learn a code, go code. If they ask you to put a marketing event together, go do that. But surround yourself by people who share a mission, and your naivety, I think, will be turned into a set of skills which will be incredibly powerful for whatever you go on to do.
Powerful advice from Nick Hungerford. Thank you so much for that. And that's a good point. Don't just jump into tech for tech's sake. Go to a place that really shares your passion and mission, because the tech will go away and the passion stays, right? So how do people sign up for an account on Nutmeg? Obviously, the Americans are not allowed, and I'm taking that very personally. I was literally going to sign up today. But how do people do it? Is there anything they should know? What's
It's super simple. So nutmeg.com, you can do everything in about 8 minutes. and get started. If you need to, you can come and see us. If you want to, you can phone us. But we're available over secure email, web chat, if that's your thing as well. But it's really hard to say anything more complicated than go to nutmeg.com and get started.
It's really easy. I did it yesterday, and I'm not very smart.
Look at you, man. Look at you, man. Trying out these things. And you are hiring as well?
Yeah, so lots of vacancies on our careers page. Please do check that out as well. I mean, we've got a growing team, fantastic environment. Now you know what it's like because I've told you all about it as well. And we'd love to meet really smart people who share our mission.
You're going to get a slew of CVs. Who wouldn't want to work for this man? All right, that's fantastic. Nick, thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Yeah. It was great. We got an email from one of your people a few weeks ago, and I was just like, yes, I know.
Well, thank you for having me. That's been great. Thanks, guys.
It's been great. Really good insight. Not only we hit the business model, but we got some really good thoughts there. So thanks if you're watching us live. We appreciate you starting off your Friday evening with us.
Bank holiday weekend.
Yeah.
Thanks for sitting here watching us.
I know, right? If you're watching us on YouTube, please come to iTunes and subscribe to the audio version. It's great. It automatically downloads to your smartphone, and you can listen to us in the tube or on the plane or anything like that. And there you go. It's episode, I think, 50-something, late 50s. If you want to contact us, it's hello@siliconreal.com. We're always looking for guests. We got a couple interns that are really rocking for us.
Yeah, working hard. So, yeah, if you want to help out, summer's over, but if you're a student or something like that and interested in helping out, and got lots of stuff to do. So.
Yeah, and hit us up with your guest suggestions on Twitter @SiliconReal. There you go. Thanks so much for LendInvest, which is one of our sponsors, P2P lending platform. Check them out at lendinvest.com. Great story, great way to get some returns there. Although do I have to do a disclaimer before I tell people to do that?
I don't think so. I think it's disclaimers on the website.
Okay, go to
but it's for investment, or you can invest and get good returns. But then it's also if you need bridge financing too. So
right,
it's a cool spot.
I'll go to Nutmeg.
Yeah.
There you go. As we say on Silicon Real, it's about the people. Thank you so much, Nick, and all the best.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Take care.
Cheers.
Why I love tech and why I'm so passionate about it is very open. And when people come and set up businesses here and they're on the internet, well, suddenly you're connected to the whole world. We should learn from Silicon Valley. There's no reason why we can't adopt some of their best practices, and I've pulled one or two of those into Tech London advocates. But I think to say, we want to be Silicon Valley in 3 years or 5 years, well, they've been around for 75 years. Look, we're starting afresh here. Let's go for it. Let's learn from them, but let's create something that's unique for London.